Hello, BookTube, and welcome to a Tuesday MegaStuff video, where I combine a bunch of little things that probably wouldn't carry a video on their own. At least I could make a whole video on their own. I have no trouble talking for 30 minutes about anything at all, but maybe for mercy's sake, to add a little variety. One of the MegaStuff bits that I will mention today is the ongoing saga of my mailman. Those of you who might be new to the channel, I got recently a new mailman. For years and years, I had a battered, beaten, slope-shouldered, glaze-eyed old civil servant as a mailman. He shuffled down the street with doom in his face. He did not hurry his steps in the rain or the sun or the snow. He was completely reliable, mainly because he was a kind of zombie, a kind of living undead. Frida liked him, of course. My old dogs liked him, of course, and he liked them. He said it's very refreshing to get a friendly dog. A lot of dogs aren't friendly. So he and I would say hi every time we went our rounds. And then one day, I rounded the corner and was presented with a young man, a very young man, in his early 20s, instead of my mail carrier. And I asked, what happened to my mailman? He said, yeah, he took early retirement. They offered him, civil servants at the post office or in the mail business, they can take early retirement if they want to. And a lot of them do. A lot of them opt to do that. And he did. And my new mailman was not just young, he's also ostentatiously beautiful. Just gorgeous pecs and shoulders and abs, a thin waist, wavy, curly hair, and soft eyes. And it was quite a shock. After having a semi-human shambling homunculus for so long, it was quite a shock. And I am out all the time. With Frida, we are out all the time. The only thing that really limits us, she is never limited in her walks by my business. Never. Because she doesn't get to come and go as she pleases. I do, but she doesn't. So if she wants to go outside, we go outside. My answer is yes. I just put aside whatever I'm doing. Unless it's, a phone call with an editor. That never happens, though. So we're out all the time. And so we see this kid all the time. But often it's, it's across a block. We can wave, but that's about it. Every once in a while, we run into each other. I ran into him this morning, and we were chatting, and Frida makes that very easy because she recognizes him now. So she runs up to him and then stands up on his legs, looking up at him with her big smiling face, and people just melt for that. She is a star in the neighborhood, an absolute star. People will go out of their way to come and greet her everywhere in the neighborhood. I confess, a part of me, I had that same thing happen with Lucy, my basset hound. People liked my pointer, Malin, very much. She was very friendly. She was very, very pretty to look at. But Lucy was something else again. She was the first dog I've ever had who was just objectively slow down the car so you can take a picture cute. Lucy was just adorable and very friendly. And she became a star in the neighborhood. Everybody knew her name. Everybody wanted to meet her. Everybody wanted to know how she was doing today. Everybody remembered the last time they met her, when they met her again. And I thought that was wonderful. It was great. It got a little bit, it touched my heart a little bit when Lucy got older, when she started to be all white. She started to have trouble walking. She couldn't see anything. She had to get right up to somebody to know who they were. But it was still touching. It was still wonderful. But I confess, there was a part of me that was thinking, maybe it would be nice not to be the entourage of your own dog. Maybe it'd be nice next time not to have a star. And at the time, that thinking seemed rational to me because I was thinking that when first Lucy and then Malin died, I was thinking that I would go to the animal shelter and I would get a raggedy old dog. I would get the oldest dog they have and just adopt that dog. Give that dog a year of comfort and peace, maybe 2 years, and then keep doing that. And that didn't happen. Fate had other plans for me. And instead, I got a dog who is, if anything, more of a star in my neighborhood than Lucy ever was. Mainly because Frida doesn't have a problem with other dogs. Malin hated them. So if you were out walking a dog, you couldn't get to know Lucy because Malin would keep the other dog away from her. Malin was unbelievably protective of Lucy. Kind of silly because Lucy, as far as I know, could not be hurt by anything physical. Dogs did manage to attack her in the course of her life, and they didn't get through her layers and layers of seal blubber. But Frida is increasingly good with dogs. She will mouth off if your dog bounces around too much. But if your dog just walks up to say hello to her, she has stopped screaming, just as a matter of course. Instead, she will just greet. and then greet you. She's still not really interested in dogs. She's much more interested in humans, but she isn't off-putting to other dogs, which means she's an even bigger star. Everybody in the neighborhood knows her. Everybody loves her. Everybody can't wait for her to go. Once she recognizes you, she has a great visual memory for people that she's met before. So once she recognizes you, she will pull at her harness and run to get up to you and jump up on you and say hi to you. And therefore, she makes it easy to stop and talk with this mail boy, because she's going to want to do that anyway. And we got on this morning to what do you do? You know, because I was talking to him about, gee, it's going to be a fairly warm day. It's going to be a long day for you delivering mail. And he asked, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a writer. And he said, oh, what kind of writing? And I said, well, I'm a book critic. I review books. And I joked with him about how you would know that already beyond a shadow of a doubt, if not for the pandemic, because you'd be delivering books to my house every day. And he nevertheless noticed that a lot of the packages that he had delivered to the house, even in his short tenure, had been books. And that he delivered a lot of them. That I wasn't just getting one of the, most people only get junk mail and bills in physical mail. So he notices when he has packages to deliver. And that got us onto a little side subject, because it turns out he is a reader. And wanted to know, oh, you're a book critic, what do you recommend? People always say that, as if I'm going to have maybe 2 books, as if I only read 2 books in a year or something like that. It's, of course, an unwieldy, enormous, unanswerable question. I let him down easy. I let him down easy, and instead started asking him questions about what kind of books he likes. And that led to a very interesting conversation. He is a typical 22-year-old. Typical 22-year-old male reader, which is, he knows that there's wonder out there, but he is simultaneously inexperienced and afraid of embarrassing himself. This is a pattern that happens with 20-something men. I know it well. I know it well. And I know how to answer it. I know how to speak to it. Because I know how to begin. I know the steps to take. I know how to gently discourage bad reading habits, bad reading people. It's around that age that young men can fall into the clutches of Kurt Vonnegut or Charles Bukowski, and I like to gently pull them out. That is a dead-end street, but it's a street that it's a dead end, but it can take you your whole life to travel it, and it's a wasted reading life where all you're doing is trying to duplicate non-literary experiences that you've had in high school or whatever. It's not worth the time of any reader to do that, and it's nice if I can save people from that, and there are many easy ways to do that. I demystify the whole process, for instance, so the embarrassment of starting without knowing anything is removed. I also tend to take a lot of the embarrassment onto myself directly by embarrassing the young men that I know. Once they realize that I can sass them and that it doesn't mean anything, it helps them to grow a little. It helps them. Young men in their 20s tend to have the thin skin of a small child. They need to learn that being disagreed with is not the end of the world. They need to learn that being wrong about something, just factually wrong about something, is not the end of the world. And I am good at that. I can help with that. And so I think that we will have a number of literary discussions, of bookish discussions. I have a feeling that will happen. I have a feeling that will be our next conversation. And I'd be willing to bet that this will lead to 2 things. One, in a normal world, it would lead to 2 things. In a normal world, in a pre-pandemic world, it would lead to, first, me making recommendations and giving him books, and 2, him coming over here for wine and calzones to sit in the living room and talk about books. It's just a natural thing. When you get off work, feel free to come over. Once Frida's done mauling you, I'll buy you some food and we can talk. You can put your feet up after a long day on the sidewalks. In the era of pandemic, that's not possible anymore. The second one isn't. First one might still be. I will definitely be able to recommend him books. I might be able to give him books. We shall see. I wasn't expecting the gods to drop in my lap the fact that he's a reader. That's wonderful. So I will gladly take that and run with it. And speaking of reading, another MegaStuff bit here would be a tech update. Yesterday I was musing about how I'm gravitating towards an iPad Pro as a reading device that will encompass all other handheld smart electronic devices. It'll be a device I can film videos on. It'll be a device that has enough memory so that I can fill it with books and not worry about running out of room. It'll be a device where I can do all sorts of composition. what I would like is one device to rule them all. And my research up till yesterday was leading me to think that device would be the iPad Pro, either the 2018 volume or the 2020. And that would in either case that would mean an outlay of money. But maybe I've been thinking maybe that is the approach to take. Instead of spending $90 here, $50 there, $100 there on a bunch of devices, none of which end up doing more than one or two things, maybe what I ought to do is wait, save up a little money, and spend a little more money on a device that will do a lot more. That may be one electronic device that all I have to do is just keep it charged. I don't anymore have to worry about what it can and cannot do. And I've done subsequent research. I research these things to a fairly well. I've done subsequent research that leads me to believe that an iPad Pro would probably be a mistake. It seems over-engineered for me. It seems like a large amount of it is designed to facilitate gaming and also artwork, electronic artwork, the creation and dissemination of electronic artwork. Now, I sketch every day with pencil and paper, but I have never done electronic artwork at all. So this would be an iPad Pro with a stylus and all those art programs would be a perfect example of the dictum that I mentioned yesterday. An old tech friend of mine said, don't ever buy an electronic device because of something you want to do. Buy it because of things you already do that you want to do on it. And this would be a perfect case of that. The iPad Pro would be a mistake for exactly that reason. I'm thinking instead I should just get a new iPad, just an ordinary iPad, with an enormous amount of internal storage. So that's where I'm leaning now, is towards a new iPad that has new technology, a smart keyboard so that I can type on it, maybe a pen so that I can sign documents and whatnot. I don't have a working scanner, and neither does anybody else. Now I'm leaning towards that, towards a new, just plain iPad, something that, among other considerations, still has a home button. So there's none of this facial recognition software, so that there's still a home button. And on the latest iPads that have a home button, I believe the home buttons are fingerprint activated, and I don't want that either. But I'm thinking, from the limited amount of research I've done so far online, I'm thinking that you can get around the fingerprint reader. That's an option that the device gives you, but that you can ask it not to. I think you can probably get around the facial recognition software the same way, but as far as I know, that's endemic to the iPad Pro. So right now I'm leaning towards a 2020 iPad. Just a normal 10-inch iPad. I was briefly thinking about the 12-inch iPad, the 12-inch size. The iPad Pro, I think, comes in a 12-inch size. It's noticeably bigger than a normal iPad, and I don't know if that wouldn't end up being awkward. I don't know if that isn't ultimately just Apple's attempt to sell a whole bunch of new stuff, because none of your old stuff will work on something that size. Your case won't, your keyboard probably won't. One way or another, I'm thinking that the closest electronic device to the thing I have always dreamt of since the electronic era dawned is actually an iPad. Some iteration of an iPad. I was thinking about it. I've been thinking about it all week, for the last week, and I have realized how much time I spend on my iPads, my various iPads. Yes, I have to shift from one to the other depending on what they do, depending on whether or not they're out of space, depending on what functions they have. But when I break down how much time I spend on an iPad, including productive time, typing with one hand on a keyboard in Google Docs, typing emails, doing social media, that sort of thing. When I tabulate how much time, and reading, a huge amount of time reading, when I tabulate how much time I spend on an iPad versus how much time I spend on a laptop, I start to realize that that maybe an iPad is the device that I need. Maybe the time I spend technically on a laptop has now gone to such a low percentage that I can phase it out. And this is the holy grail of tech channels when they talk about new iPads. The question that always comes up, the question that all of them want an answer to is, can this replace my laptop? And so far, they all say no to every iteration of the iPad. And the ones who don't, the ones who say, oh, sure it can, yeah, you watch their videos and you see them in the midst. You get 15 or 17 minutes into the video, and suddenly they're saying, yeah, well, in this video, which is titled, I replaced my MacBook with an iPad, That's the title of the video. But 17 minutes in, they're talking about how, well, yeah, this particular editing suite won't work on the iPad, so this, I need my MacBook. And I'm saying, all right, well, then no. What you're saying, apart from the lie in your video's title, is that this can't replace your MacBook. Okay, fine. Tell me when it can. So we shall see. Maybe that's the goal. Maybe that's the path that I'll be on. Maybe I should make a tech channel. Can you imagine? The least tech literate person in the world making a tech channel. That would almost be funny in its own way. But anyway, that's your tech update. The only thing we have is mail, and we have just one package. It's from a publisher. So we'll see what we have here. I'm very encouraged that we're getting at least a couple of pieces of mail every day. More mail could come today. That's very encouraging to me. There was a long period there in the depths of winter where I wasn't getting anything, and I understood that. I wasn't objecting. But nevertheless, it was rough after the glory days of 2019. So what have we? Oh, fantastic. Okay, great. Oh, I'm so happy to have a finished copy of this. Fantastic. Okay, I don't have a pub sheet for this, but boy, oh boy. Okay. Okay. I can't recommend this author highly enough. This is Jared Yates Sexton. This new book is called American Rule. How a Nation Conquered the World and Failed Its People. You have an upside down flag there on the cover. And this is the author a couple of years ago of a great Trump book. One of the few Trump books that isn't a travesty, that is actually great. The people are going to rise like the waters upon your shore, or some title like that. I would not have titled it whatever its title was. I wonder if it tells me the actual title. The people are going to rise like the waters upon your shore. That is a terrific book. It is well worth your time to read, especially if you're an American. And this is his new book let's read about it. Since I don't have a pub sheet, we'll just read it straight from the book. Boy, I'm glad to have a finished copy of this. Stolen elections, fascist rallies, families torn apart and locked away, breathtaking disregard for life and liberty has come to define modern America. A common refrain erupts at each new atrocity. This isn't who we are. But it's long past time to face the truth. Americans in power have abused and subjugated others since the very beginning. Enabling that corruption are many myths of American exceptionalism and the steadfast values that color our understanding of every chapter of our history. In American Rule, Jared Yates Sexton upends those conventional fictions, exposing some of America's deepest transgressions against people within its borders and across the globe. Tracing our nation's history from its founding up to the present, slavery, brutal expansion, dirty politics, and more, Sexton demonstrates that today's overt moral failings were not only predictable, but inevitable. And until we reckon with how we got here, we cannot move forward. Stirring, deeply researched, and disturbingly familiar, American Rule confronts the origins and perpetuation of these narratives still in the public memory, the acts we have chosen to forget, and the present crisis we can no longer ignore. And I read an ebook advanced copy of this and found myself disagreeing with the author a lot in very productive ways. I don't know the date on this thing. It's September, I believe. I will check, double check. And I'm very much going to reread it. Very much going to reread it because this is a subtle author and a powerful thinker. So I don't want to disagree with him in a review until I have studied his arguments. But one of the main arguments that runs throughout this book, I think, at least from my first preliminary reading, is a refrain that you will hear often from talking news pundits in the mainstream media, and that has always driven me crazy. It's always driven me nuts. And that refrain goes something like, Donald Trump is not the disease, he's just a symptom. Donald Trump is just a symptom of a deeper rot. Donald Trump himself is not important. It's the things he represents, the trends, the deterioration in moral fiber that he represents. That's the important thing. And that's not true. that may be true, but it doesn't matter at all. And it's really enabling of all the darkest parts of American society to say something like that, because it is first cousin to saying that what Donald Trump does is not important. I don't agree with that at all. If you went to a doctor, if you went to a hospital, I know that medical emergency analogies are common when talking about Donald Trump, but in large part that's justified, because if there has been a person in the body public of America who has been more of a cancer I don't know. The whole point of a cancer is not just that it kills living things, but that it suborns those living things to kill themselves. So you have a senator who you called his wife ugly, and you implicated his father in the murder of President Kennedy, and he's kissing your behind in public, calling you a great man. That is cancerous. That isn't just evil. That's cancerous. That's you turning someone else into an avatar of yourself, which is what cancer cells do. But I always want to make the medical analogy, which is that if you went to a hospital with a string of really bad symptoms, let's say you lost sight in one eye, no doctor in the world would say to you, well, the fact that you can't see out of one of your eyes is relatively unimportant. It's just a symptom. What we really need to do is dig at the ultimate cause. You would walk away from that doctor. You would fire that doctor and get someone else. If they said that you can't see, you not being able to see out of one eye is unimportant. What I'm trying to say here is that analogy drives me nuts because the symptoms are plenty effing bad. Get rid of Donald Trump and a lot of those symptoms will go away with him. A lot of them will. People always say to me, well, you know, if the cabinet used the 25th Amendment, Trump he's obviously mentally unfit for the job. He's obviously an embarrassment and a danger. If you use the 25th Amendment to get rid of him, for his cabinet to come together and say, you know, we're taking over, well, then Pence would be in charge. Mike Pence would be in charge. Mike Pence was a stupendously corrupt governor. A governor whose corruption and double dealing very much verged into evil territory. But he's also a conventional human being and a conventional politician. People would often tell me, well, if Trump were to die of a stroke, or if he were to be assassinated, or if his cabinet were to exercise the 25th Amendment and remove him, well, then you'd have President Pence, and that's no better. And I would say to people, you're nuts. Absolutely nuts if you believe that. There isn't even a shred of comparison between the two. One is infinitely worse than the other. One doesn't care about America, about settled rule of law, about the precedence of government. Doesn't care about any of them. And the other does. In his own way, does. In a bad way, does. Pence is something that the American political system has dealt with many times. A corrupt politician. A corrupt and sham-pious politician. The American political system is designed to deal with creatures like that. It has dealt with them literally from the beginning. Donald Trump is not any of those things. And he commands a following of 60 million Americans. So he's not just an outlying example of a freak in the political system. He's also a dangerously powerful one. Someone who could call troops into the streets and who will do that if he isn't continued in power. So to say some variation of, yeah, the system has always been bad and Donald Trump is just the latest symptom, that drives me nuts. That really drives me nuts. So we will see. It's possible that this author has a subtler point that I missed when outraged reading his book the first time. So I'm glad to have a finished copy. I'll put this on the list and read it tonight with care and attention after the world has gone to sleep with pencil in hand. So that, in the meantime, we only have one book, and it's American Rule by Jared Yates Sexton. I strongly recommend it. Strongly recommend this author. You don't want to miss anything this author writes. He's one of those authors, and those authors are rare. Those kinds of public thinkers are rare. They deserve attention, even if you disagree with them. But anyway, that's it. So you have a mailboy update, you have a tech update, you have a little mail, and I'm gonna wrap this up for now because somebody, as you can hear, is a little restless. Do you want to see your fans? Huh? Whee! Look at the camera, baby. There you go. Oh, there you go. Look at them all. Huh? Oosh, baby. Oshka, baby. Probably wants to go out. It's nice and warm here. It's 80 degrees Fahrenheit. No freakish weather. Most of the country is still sunk in freakish heat. And then there's the middle part of the country that had freakish heat, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, that dropped to below freezing in the course of 10 hours and enveloped them in a snowstorm. In 10 hours, you go from bright, hot height of summer to 7 inches of snow. So Boston has nothing to complain about when it comes to weather. Probably a little too warm. Frida is very vulnerable to the heat. It just wipes her out. And she won't admit it. she'll just keep going until she keels over. I don't want that. So it's probably a little too warm for a very long walk, but it's time probably for us to spend a little time out of doors with the birdies. So I'm going to wrap up this MegaStuff video, but I will see you tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.